Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so today we're going to be taking a look at 7.23, so the third quest in chapter 2 of act 7. We're going to go over each and every single one of the paths and then take a look at the bosses. So I'm going to try and keep it as brief as possible, as I do think several of the paths we have kind of discussed in the previous videos, because the same principles will apply. Now the path on the right side, top right side, has energy adoption lightning and energy adoption ice. Needless to say, this is one of the most cheesable paths in the entire quest. You can bring in Havoc, Ghost, Kingpin, Silver Surfer, probably missing something, and just totally rush through it, ignoring everything and everyone, and getting a huge damage increase on top of it. So yes, this is like super cheesable path. In theory, you're meant to use Cosmic and Cosmic and Mutant champions to utilize their superiority from even footing, and then you take less energy damage for each of your Fury Armor Up or Prowess buffs. So if you bring in, let's say, a Colossus against a Mutant champion, you start the fight with minimum of 3 armor ups, you'd hardly be taking any damage from energy adoption ice, because like he's called something anyway, so you'd be taking hardly any damage from energy adoption lightning, and you can just play as normal and heal from willpower. So that is meant to be the strategy, bringing in Cosmic or Mutant champions that have access to the buffs mentioned here in this Dynamo node. Really don't have to. You can just blitz through with Ghost, with Havoc, with Silver Surfer, ton of other champions. Very straightforward path. One of the quickest, easiest, and most fun paths in the entire chapter. Now, this redlining, unblockable Specialist 2 lane is also actually quite fun, because redlining significantly increases your combat power rate if you're above a bar power, but you need to be careful not to get too much above, because if you go to about 2 1/3 bars of power, then you lose all your power. So the key is actually to kind of like shift in between 1 to 2 bars of power at all times. And there are a ton of champions actually that can benefit from this very hugely. Let's say Professor X, or even Hulkbuster or Immortal Hulk. But all in all, there's no adversity really to face on this lane, because they have like special 2s are unblockable, but the champions are not really the hardest ones to go up against for most part. So it's a fairly straightforward lane. You can just use your favorite champions, and that will be just about it. It's not cheesable lane, but it's not hard. Now let's move on to this Thorns lane, and as always with Thorns, you can just choose champions that directly counters it. So I do mean Namor, who can reflect the Thorns damage back to the opponent. So Namor is going to be great for this. Then we have Omega Red, Gambit, Deadwill, Hell's Kitchen, I believe Strife, and a few other champions that can just basically ignore this lane with their designated attacks. In Gambit's case, mediums, heavies, and special attacks. In Omega Red case, all tentacle hits, which happen to be mediums, heavies, and special attacks. Or you can use champions that work within the confines of this repulsive and superiority even footing node. Basically, you're meant to use the same class champion that you're going up against, and then for each active debuff on you, you take 30% of the damage less, basically, that you would take from Thorns. But if you have the superiority, so if you're using the same class champion, you're actually reflecting and dealing a increased amount of damage back to the opponent. And this Rust and Ruin node is here just to pretty much make sure that you have some debuffs active on you. So you can use basically any or most of Science and Cosmic champions for this lane as well. Or again, you can just Quake, Namor, whoever here. So it's up to you how you choose to do this lane in particular. Now this lane, stacking power, special delivery, and fight or flight is actually a superbly fun lane if you're using some of the buff heavier mutants like Colossus and Magneto. Magneto can totally cheese through this lane, even though there are no metal attackers. Magneto still has a great time on this lane, where you can basically end up getting like a full 3 bars of power just by charging heavy attack. The idea is you can't gain power through any other means, but every time you get a buff placed on you, you gain 20% of a bar of power. And needless to say, any and all champions that have frequent access to buffs can do quite well here. However, you can quite literally use any champions because dexterity is a buff and this fight or flight is a buff. And if you play carefully, you can just work with dexterity and nothing else is really needed. Like I was considering uploading a video where I do several fights on this lane, literally just with Apocalypse. So you don't have to bring in champions that are heavy on the buff side, but they will make your life easier. But if you need like a specific counter for, I don't know, Deadpool's Hell's Kitchen or Kingpin, then you can. Speaking of Deadpool Hell's Kitchen and Kingpin, my solemn advice is to bring in White Magneto just to make these fights significantly easier for yourself. There's no need to kind of like struggle against them. So bring in White Magneto with you and you will bypass their parry, stun, shrug off abilities for Deadpool's Hell Kitchen and Kingpin, and that will significantly help you also for the Hitmonkey boss, which is a total of 3 fights, which is perfect. So when you do this lane, taking White Magneto is highly advisable, and then just bring in a Colossus or bring in a Magneto, the red Magneto, and you're going to be doing just fine. It's actually a very, very fun lane. Right. Let's go for this lane number 5. So we again have superiority even footing. So you need to be the same class as opponent in order to gain the extra buff. And opponents have vigor and supercharge. However, you are able to place a 100% petrify on the opponents via intercept or hitting their blocks and stuff like that. Right. So all in all, this is a fairly straightforward lane. I personally chose to just kind of ignore those superiority lanes and chose to fight through vigor with high damage DPS characters. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And when it comes to supercharge, it can actually kind of be helpful to let you push opponent to special 2 or sometimes just give opponents bar power so you don't have to look for extra openings. And considering the fact that none of these opponents have extra power gain outside of that supercharge buff, it's really not all that hard to deal with them. So yeah, you can just kind of use your favorite champions and you're gonna be good. Obviously, if you bring in champions that have petrify abilities of their own, you're also gonna do well. So let's say Captain America Infinity War, whilst having tech champion on your team, is gonna do great for these lanes. Void is gonna do fantastic for these lanes. Yellow Jacket can probably do quite alright too. And yeah, so either you bring in your own petrifies or you just bring in high DPS characters, and that is entirely up to you. And there's nothing too tricky on this lane to go up against. It's just like Luke Cage, Hood, Massacre, Sentry, Ronin, and Human Torch. So the fights are as straightforward as it comes. And now we're gonna come to the lane that I probably like the most in this quest, but it's also a bit tricky. So we have Buffet. That's a quite potent Buffet with 10% of their max health. However, there's heal reversal. So that means any healing abilities that you have and your opponent has, both will be reversed. But thanks to the Buffet node, that will be the most effective means of dealing damage in this fight for you. Then we have Safeguard, which is fair enough. You guys know how to play around Safeguard, either ability accuracy reduction or damage over time effects. And then we have Aspect of War, and we all kind of hate Aspect of War, but I liked it here quite a bit because that changed the idea of this lane. Now, Aspect of War will eventually make opponents go unblockable and will basically make it harder for you to find openings. So therefore, that is the key aspect for you on this lane. Now, don't worry about Buffet, don't worry about the heal reversal or Safeguard or anything else. Like, that all takes care of itself, because triggering dexterity, you will be triggering buffs, therefore Buffet will trigger, and every time you do trigger that Buffet, they're going to take 10% of that damage, and that is how you're meant to do damage, primarily throughout this lane. The only thing to work around is Aspect of War, and in order to be able to do that, you either want to have ability to apply slow debuff without needing to land your parries, or you want to be able to go unblockable or somehow break through opponent's blocks. Therefore, champions like Apocalypse and 4 charges, for instance, is going to be greatly useful here. Nick Fury can be very useful, but keep in mind that Buffet will mess with his Fury buff, so I do not recommend using Nick Fury. So we're going to stick with Apocalypse here for now. Shang-Chi was a great addition as well, because Shang-Chi can obviously break through the blocks, go unblockable, trigger buffs, and has slow on his own. But the entire point of this lane is just to kind of fight long enough till Buffet kills the opponent, and then any champion can be used. And in order to be able to do that better, again, just finding openings with champions like, Elsa Bloodstone, Apocalypse, Shang-Chi was kind of like the best strategy here. Quite honestly, you can bring in Ghost as well. Ghost would do absolutely fantastic. Just wait out the aspect of war and then use that phase to find an extra opening. But that is kind of like the name of the game here. Now, opponents-wise, there is a Yellow Jacket, which can be quite annoying in Iron Man Infinity War, especially on aspect of war. So for those instances, yeah, you do want to get maybe some more specific counters, like Human Torch or Magneto, let's say for Iron Man Infinity War, and try and get that fight done as quickly as possible. But yeah, this was a very, very fun lane. I did it in my second stream, I think. And I will probably post another video separately going through this lane. But remember, the entire idea is just to play around aspect of war and play slowly, and eventually opponents are going to kill themselves. It was quite cool. I liked it a lot. Now let's take a look at the boss fights. Now, Venom the Duck is a fairly straightforward idea. For most part, you will either have to dex a lot, or Venom the Duck is going to be the unblockable entire fight, which is fair enough. And then you have Crit Me with your best shot, critical setup, and aggressive. So any champion that crits a lot is a good option for this fight. That's quite as simple as that. I think I ended up using Shang-Chi, but you can bring in Aegon, you can bring in Corvus, Ghost, whatever, and you're going to do just fine. Just play with Venom the Duck as he's unstoppable, and yeah, just crit. That's it. Not much to it. Use a crit heavy champions. Wasp is actually very good for that fight. Wasp is very good for that Venom the Duck. Now, Hitmonkey and Life Cycle. Initially, it seems like a very tricky combo, but it really isn't, and let me explain it. Now, Life Cycle obviously works quite annoyingly with Hitmonkey, because ideally, you never ever want to knock down Hitmonkey, because if you do, then he triggers his mode, starts shrugging off debuffs, starts shrugging off stuns, and starts evading, and the fight gets a lot trickier. You can still use pretty much any champion to bypass it, and that still goes back to the good old Life Cycle counter tactic, where you just build up to level 3, do not knock down Hitmonkey ever, and then when he is at a very low amount of health, drop a heavy attack, knock him down, and then use a level 3 while the shield is disabled. Therefore, you will effectively have bypassed Life Cycle with a single knockdown. You don't have to worry about extending that window or anything else. That is a way how you can use any champion to bypass Hitmonkey's abilities to bypass Life Cycle. For me personally, Archangel was the perfect option here, because he's skilled, because he can be bled, because he can be poisoned. Archangel absolutely destroyed him. But alternatively, you can bring in White Magneto, and Hitmonkey will not be able to bypass or shrug off those passive stuns because they're not debuffs. And at that point, you can start knocking him down, and that passive stun is quite long enough to be able to damage him whilst he's stunned exclusively. You should be doing good enough there. And obviously, then you still have your standard True Strike, True Accuracy champions. Heavy Assault does provide quite a bit of extra damage if you use champions that rely on heavy attacks, and that, again, is quite easy thing to do if you are using White Magneto's pre-fight. But if you have Archangel, then you can have very little problems. Or Apocalypse, because he can't shrug off Apocalypse stuff either. Right, and now we're going to take a look at Surge Protector, Power Struggle, Punisher 2099. This fight actually can be totally cheesable with any champion that has power control on level 1. Because of the way how Power Struggle works, you can basically make it so that he never ever gets to activate special attack. So either of the Visions, Hawkeye, Guillotine 2099 is an insane option for this. So let's say those 4 champions already kind of like it's a fairly solid pull. But on top of it, you can obviously still use Magneto. Magneto is who I used because Punisher is a metal champion. And then besides Magneto, Dr. Doom is also a fantastic option here. And Magic will absolutely destroy. No, wait, not Magic, sorry, but Dr. Doom definitely can destroy this guy because there's a cheese with Power Struggle. So yeah, let's say Dr. Doom, let's say Magneto, and then we have Guillotine 2099, Hawkeye, either one of the two Visions. I think that's a fair amount. Obviously, there will be more champions that I didn't mention. It's just kind of like the more dominant options, the more straightforward ones. And that is about it. I'm not going to keep you guys any longer. So going over, remember, this is the cheese lane, where you get a ton of extra damage. Most of the lanes are quite cool and interesting designs. I did enjoy this quest actually a lot. I kind of liked all of these interesting interactions. So absolutely loved it. Let me know if you guys want to see clear of this lane with buffet, heal, reversal, safeguard. I think it's fairly straightforward. You just kind of need to start doing it, and you're going to understand how well that buffet and heal reversal kind of protects you. But yeah, that is about it, and I'm going to catch you guys tomorrow. See ya! Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the